Carney drops shocking revelation about hidden power broker, leaves room in total silence. The dust had barely settled after Canada's April 2025 snap federal election when Prime Minister Mark Carney delivered a stunning revelation that rippled through Ottawa. In what was supposed to be a routine policy briefing, Carney veered off script and spoke with uncharacteristic candor about a hidden power broker influencing major decisions from behind the scenes. His remarks weren't shouted or dramatized. He spoke plainly, with a tone that made the silence that followed feel heavier than any political debate. For a leader known for composure and global polish, the admission came like a crack in the facade. Carney used the Canada Infrastructure Bank's $1 billion loan to BC Ferries as the core example. The money, which Canadians were told would fund climate-friendly domestic projects, ended up being used to purchase ferries built in Chinese Communist Party-linked shipyards. The contradiction between the messaging and the outcome was stark. Carney didn't deny that the deal had been sold internally as progress, but he hinted it had been shaped by interests with priorities misaligned with Canadian industry or sovereignty. While Transport Minister Chrystia Freeland had publicly criticized Premier David Eby for approving the deal, Carney admitted the federal government helped fund it, exposing a dangerous double standard. That moment peeled back the curtain on a deeper issue: the expanding presence of unelected actors within Canada's power structure. Carney didn't name names, but he was clear. His own government had been swayed by forces operating beyond public accountability. This was no one-off lapse in judgment. It revealed how policy can be driven by consultants, bureaucrats, and advisors with little connection to Canadian voters or consequences for failed outcomes. For critics across the aisle, it confirmed a long-held suspicion that key decisions are made far from Parliament's floor. Carney then turned to another growing concern: the federal bureaucracy itself. With nearly 40% of Canadian workers employed directly or indirectly by government, he admitted the public sector had become a force of inertia. Departments bloated by years of unchecked expansion now struggled to adapt or deliver results. The sheer size of the state, he said, allows mistakes to be buried and creates a self-preserving culture more focused on protecting itself than serving citizens. For a Liberal Prime Minister to acknowledge this publicly was almost unheard of and signaled mounting internal frustration. That frustration is most visible in the worsening housing crisis. Although some projects remain under construction, analysts warn of a steep decline in new housing and construction jobs by 2028. Carney openly admitted that the federal government is lagging behind demand and that red tape often blocks meaningful solutions. He cited bureaucratic inflexibility and misaligned priorities as reasons why housing is no longer affordable for millions of Canadians. For many, it was the first time a sitting prime minister had spoken so bluntly about the state's inability to solve the very crisis it helped create. As if that weren't enough, Carney dove into the cost of living crisis, highlighting the disconnect between efficient food production and rising grocery prices. Despite advancements in agriculture and logistics, food prices continue to soar. The culprit, he explained, is inflationary monetary policy and years of expansive government spending. Carney didn't blame others. He took ownership of the decisions that led to this reality, noting that the policy tools meant to stabilize the economy had instead inflated assets and eroded real wages. The result has been a sharp shift of wealth from wage earners to asset holders. What shocked observers most was Carney's partial alignment with Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre's criticism of monetary policy. While he didn't mention Poilievre by name, Carney acknowledged that fiscally conservative ideas, like balanced budgets, reduced money printing, and tighter government, are gaining support for good reason. He admitted that many working-class Canadians now see central bank actions as a driver of inequality, not stability. This was more than a political calculation. It was a recognition that the old economic consensus is no longer holding. That admission sparked debate within his own ranks. Carney, long seen as a globalist technocrat, now found himself agreeing with parts of the very narrative his opponents had built campaigns around. Whether this marks a strategic pivot or a deeper ideological shift is unclear. But it exposed tension at the core of his leadership. Can he represent both the global elite he has long been aligned with and the everyday Canadians increasingly skeptical of elite decision-making? Matters escalated when Carney discussed national defense. He reaffirmed Canada's commitment to hitting NATO's 2% spending target ahead of schedule, but warned that sacrifices would be necessary in the years ahead. He didn't clarify what those sacrifices would be, only that tough choices were coming. That lack of specificity sparked backlash, with critics accusing him of preparing to gut essential domestic programs in favor of geopolitical optics. The fear that social services may take a backseat to foreign military priorities added to public unease. This added fuel to a growing perception that Carney's priorities are shaped by external interests. His deep ties to global financial institutions and elite international networks, once seen as a strength, are now viewed by many as a liability. While he presents himself as a steady global statesman, critics argue his vision often feels disconnected from the lived experiences of Canadians struggling to make rent, buy groceries, or find stable employment. His latest remarks, while unusually honest, may have only deepened the divide between Ottawa's rhetoric and reality. Calls are now mounting in Parliament for greater transparency. Opposition leaders demand a full investigation into the Canada Infrastructure Bank's operations and the individuals who pushed through the ferry loan. Some are calling for audits and parliamentary hearings to determine whether Canadian taxpayers are being used to finance decisions made in backrooms, far from democratic oversight. The notion of a hidden power broker has moved from political metaphor to a real line of inquiry, one that could shape the remainder of Carney's term. Yet despite the furor, the moment that lingers most wasn't loud. It was the silence that followed his comments. No one interrupted. No one challenged him on the spot. The room simply froze. Because deep down, everyone there understood the weight of what had just been said. Carney had spoken a quiet truth out loud, a truth that can't be easily dismissed, spun, or buried. Whether it was a slip or a calculated choice, it pulled the curtain back on something much larger than one deal or one policy. It raised the question Canadians are now asking more urgently than ever: who's really running the country, and can they be held accountable?